Welcome to our nostalgic journey, Nostalgia Quiz. Guess the vintage items from Grandma's house. Are you ready to step back in time and identify the relics from the past? What vintage item was often worn to protect clothing while cooking or cleaning? An apron was often worn to protect clothing from stains and spills while cooking or cleaning. Which vintage item was used to manually sharpen pencils? Pencil sharpeners were used to manually sharpen pencils before electric ones. They are still used today for their nostalgic charm. What vintage item was commonly used to preserve food before modern refrigeration? A root cellar was commonly used to preserve food before modern refrigeration. It provides a cool and dark environment to keep food fresh for longer periods of time. Which vintage item was typically used to wind and set mechanical timepieces? Clock keys were used to wind and set mechanical timepieces such as antique clocks and some pocket watches. What vintage kitchen item was used to churn butter? A butter churn was used to agitate cream and turn it into butter, a common practice in past generations. What vintage item was commonly used for communication before the invention of telephones? Morse code was a vintage communication method that used dots and dashes to represent letters and numbers. It was widely used before the invention of telephones. What vintage item was commonly used to heat water before electric kettles? Before electric kettles, water was commonly heated on the stove using pots or kettles. Which vintage item was used to iron clothes before electric irons? Sad irons were made of cast iron and were heated on a stove or fireplace before being used to iron clothes. Which vintage item was used to hold keys before the invention of keychains? Key baskets were used to hold keys before keychains were invented. They were often made of metal and had a handle to carry the keys conveniently. What vintage item was commonly used for writing before ballpoint pens? Quill pens were made from bird feathers and were commonly used for writing before ballpoint pens were invented. Which vintage item was used to peel apples and other fruits? apple peeler was used to easily peel apples and other fruits. It saved time and effort in preparing them for cooking or eating. What vintage item was commonly used to measure time before digital watches? Pocket watches were commonly used to measure time before digital watches. They were portable and could be carried in a pocket or attached to a chain. Which vintage item was used to store and play vinyl records? A gramophone was the vintage item used to store and play vinyl records. The iconic device used a large horn to amplify the sound produced by rotating records. What vintage item was commonly used for navigation before GPS? Before GPS, navigators used a sextant to determine their position by measuring the angle between celestial bodies and the horizon. Which vintage item was traditionally worn by women to hold up their stockings? Garter belts were worn by women to hold up their stockings before the invention of pantyhose. What vintage item was used to manually mix and beat ingredients in baking? The correct answer is wooden spoon. Grandma would stir and mix ingredients using a trusty wooden spoon, which is still used today for cooking and baking. Which vintage item was commonly used to store and display photographs? Photo albums were a popular way to preserve and showcase memories before the digital age. What vintage item was often used to light up rooms before electric lamps? Oil lamps were often used to light up rooms before electric lamps were invented. They were fueled by oil and emitted a warm, flickering glow. What vintage item was commonly used to weigh ingredients in cooking? A kitchen scale was commonly used to weigh ingredients in cooking. It was an essential tool for accurate measurement. Which vintage item was used to remove wrinkles from clothing before steam irons? Before steam irons, a mangle, also known as a clothes wringer, was used to remove wrinkles from clothing. What vintage item was commonly used to tote groceries or personal items? Wicker baskets were commonly used to tote groceries or personal items in the vintage era. They were lightweight, durable, and had handles for easy carrying. Which vintage item was used to write letters and keep correspondence organized? roll-top desk was used to write letters and store correspondence. Its roll-top cover provided privacy and organization for the writer. What vintage item was commonly used to mix and serve cocktails? Martini shakers were commonly used in the vintage era to mix and serve cocktails, adding an element of class and style to the cocktail experience. Which vintage item was used to capture and preserve memorable moments? Polaroid cameras were popular in the past for their instant photo development. You could take a picture and see it develop in front of your eyes.